In this tutorial, I'm going to teach you guys how to build a calculator in C. If you've been following along with this course, you'll know that in the beginning of the course, we actually created a calculator, and it was a very basic calculator. Basically, we let the user input two numbers, and we took those numbers, we added them together, and we printed the answer out onto the screen. In this tutorial, I'm going to take some of the stuff that we've learned since then and show you guys how we can build a fully functional four-function calculator. So this calculator will be able to add, subtract, multiply, and divide, and we're going to let the user decide which one they want to do. So we'll let them decide if they want to add or subtract or whatever. It's going to be pretty cool, and we're going to end up using some of the stuff that we've learned recently in the course, like if statements. We're also going to use like getting input from users, and I'm going to show you guys how you can get characters as input from a user as well. So down here, we want to start making our calculator. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the user to enter a number. Then I'm going to ask them to enter an operator like plus, minus, division, or subtraction. Finally, we're going to ask them to enter in a third number, and then we'll, depending on what operator they specify, so addition, subtraction, whatever, we will perform the correct operation and we'll print out the number. So the first thing I want to do is create variables where we can store the numbers and the operator. So I'm going to make some double variables, and I'm just going to call this one num1, and then we'll make another double, we'll call it num2. And finally, we'll make a variable that will store the operator that they enter. So this is just going to be a char, and I'm just going to call it OP for operator. All right, so now we want to actually get input from the user. I want to figure out what numbers they want to use and then what operator they want to use as well. So down here, why don't we get some input? The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to print out a prompt. So I'm just going to say enter a number. And now what we want to do is we want to be able to take the number that they give us and store it inside of one of those doubles that we created. So I'm just going to use this scanf function, scanf, and in here I'm going to specify that we want to get a double. So remember, when we're using scanf, if we want to scan for a double, we use lf, and lf is going to scan for a double. And now I'm going to use a comma, and we'll put the variable that we want to store in here. So I'm going to use this ampersand, and I'm just going to say num1. So this is exactly what we need to do to be able to get the user's input and store it into num1. The next thing we want to do is get the operator. So I'm going to type out another prompt, and I'm just going to say enter operator. Basically, they'll be entering in plus sign, minus sign, asterisk, or forward slash, depending on what they want to do. And again, now we're going to scan for a character. Now, when we're scanning for a character in scanf, and I actually don't think I've talked about this yet in this course, we want to do something special. So I want to put a % and a C, but before I put %C, I want to put a space. So whenever we're getting a character from the user using scanf, we always want to put a space right here before %C. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And again, we want to store this in that OP variable. So I'm just going to say OP. And one more time, we're going to get another number. So I'm just going to copy this. We'll paste this down here. And we're going to get this one for num2. So now we should have all of the input for our program. So I'm getting the first number, I'm getting the operator, and I'm getting the second number. The last thing we have to do now is actually do the math. So we're going to have to figure out which operator they wanted to use, right? So we have this OP variable. And this is storing like a plus sign, a minus sign, a asterisk, or a forward slash. So depending on what that's storing, we want to print something different out. So we can actually use an if statement to do this. So I can use an if statement to check and see what operator is inside of our operator variable. And depending on which one it is, we can do a different operation. So I can say if, and the first thing I'm going to do is just check to see if the operator is equal to a plus sign. So if the operator that the user entered is equal to a plus sign, then we're going to want to add the two numbers together. So I'm just going to print out these two numbers, and I'll just say num1 plus num2 because we're going to add both of them together. We can also use an else if, so I'm going to want to check a few other conditions. I'm going to check to see if the operator is equal to a minus sign. And if the operator is equal to a minus sign, then instead of adding the numbers, we're going to subtract them. So over here, I'll just copy this and we'll paste this guy down here. So it's going to be num1 minus num2. And I can actually just copy this whole thing and we'll paste it down here. So let me make some more room. Down here, we'll paste this other else if. And here we're going to check to see if it's division. So we'll check for a forward slash. And again, we're just going to want to print out a decimal number. So it's going to be num1 divided by num2. And finally, we're going to check for multiplication. So if it's multiplication, then we're going to multiply them together. So now we're checking for each of the operators. We're checking for addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. But here's the thing, what happens if the user enters in an operator that we didn't want? So for example, if they don't enter in any of these operators, we're gonna wanna tell them. So I'm gonna have this like print out a little error message. We're just gonna say else, and basically the code inside this else block will get executed if none of these conditions up here are true. And down here we can just make a printf, and I'm just gonna print out invalid operator. So now we have our if statement, our if block set up, and this should be everything that we need to use our little calculator. All right, so let's go ahead and run this program. So you can see over here it says enter a number, so we can enter a number. Let's enter in 5.9 and enter an operator. We'll add numbers, and now let's enter in 4.0. So we're gonna add 5.9 and 4. So when I click enter, we should go through all of those if statements and figure out what we need to do. And you'll see over here that we're adding 5.9 and 4 together, and we're getting 9.9. So looks like the program worked. Let's try it again. We'll try another operator. Why don't we try to multiply some numbers? So let's multiply 6 and times, I don't know, 5.7. So we get 34.2. That seems about right. All right, and then one more time we'll run this, and I want to try to enter in an invalid operator. So we'll say like 5.7. And I'm just going to enter in a G. So that's an invalid operator. That's not going to work. And I'll enter my number. Let's do 8. And you can see it tells us invalid operator. So basically we have a 4-function calculator. This calculator can multiply, divide, subtract, and add. And if you don't enter in a correct operator, it's smart enough to yell at you and tell you that you have an invalid operator. So it seems to work pretty well. I'm pretty happy with it. And you can see down here, like this is a perfect situation for using something like an if statement, right? We have this variable OP, right? It's storing some sort of operator. We don't necessarily know what's inside of there, but I can use if statements and I can respond to the different scenarios. So in the situation where it's a plus sign, I can respond. In the situation where it's a minus sign, I can respond, etc. And this just makes our programs a lot smarter, and it helps us to do different things when different situations arise.